And hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pumpkin Copter Cast, the only video game show. So today we have the return, a friend of the show, Kenneth Kenny Washington Jr.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me back on again.
I figured since your channel and your career is all about musics, I figured, what, and since this is a video game show, we should give some of our top five most favorite video game soundtracks.
Absolutely, I'm very excited to share out what I have and hear what you have.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I will start it off.
Okay,
My list will be in order that I can remember them, not necessarily in the order of preference. And my number
okay.
five pick is, which will come as a surprise to very few people, is pretty much like the soundtrack from Ocarina of Time, just because I've played that game many, many times, and I'm sure once I've played the other Zeldas as many times as I've played that, those will be burned in my brain. But that was one of my that was one of that and the first Paper Mario game were those the two games I
Oh,
played over and over again in my childhood.
right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really, really good one. I actually had more personal experience with Majora's Mask, and I thought about putting that one on. That one did not quite make my list, but Ocarina of Time, definitely classic, definitely kind of really started off that entire generation, a whole new face of Link and the Legend of Zelda series. So that's a really good pick. So if that's your number five, I can't wait to hear what the rest of them are.
Yep. And specifically in that number five, in the Ocarina of Time soundtrack, would probably it's a tie between either Zelda's Lullaby or Saria Song, because one of those
Classics.
yep, one of them just makes me almost cry every time, and the others is one of those songs that you remix it properly, you got yourself a proper a proper dance song at a party.
And honestly, I've heard enough music to where you could be referring to either one of those songs for either one of those criteria. Yeah, those are both great tracks. And there are some really awesome remixes out there of those two tracks specifically. And I have a fond appreciation for Zelda's Lullaby as well. It's
Yep.
beautiful when played on piano. So I guess I'll get into my number five. But before I do, I did want to throw out some honorable mentions that just barely didn't make it, and I won't go into detail. But I wanted to just shout out that I have appreciation for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers on the SNES, the first Power Rangers on the Super Nintendo, and I also have an appreciation for Final Fantasy VII. A lot of great tracks came from there. They just didn't quite make my list. So, but that's it. I'll go ahead and get into my number five, which is, I hope this isn't cheating. I really appreciate the music from Super Smash Brothers Melee. If we just get into like the original music and the remixes, I have a very strong appreciation for those tracks, because that's the first time we heard that awesome Great Palace remix. It's the first time we heard the reimagining of Big Blue, Mute City, and then, of course, who can forget that menu theme? Da 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 dee 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 da da da. It's classic.
Yep. Now it's flooding back into my brain right now.
And now it'll be with you the whole rest of the day, so you're welcome.
Uh, yeah, so before I get into my number four, I will give my list. I have a honorable mention, and I was thinking about including it on the list, but since they're technically remixes, I guess it wouldn't strictly count. But Just I will summarize this as quickly as I can. But a few years ago, the Irish musical game composer Emer Noon made a Kickstarter to do several Irish remixes of Irish orchestra compositions of various Legend of Zelda musics, and uh, I was practically drip fed Irish music when I was a youngin, and just seeing like the energy of like really upbeat Irish music to Zelda sounds, it's just amazing. Like the two of the all of the tracks, the two that stick out to mind are the Irish remix for Wind Waker and the Clocktown theme from Majora's Mask, and yeah, for any of the -7 people listening to this, if you can find it on Amazon, if you look up the Celtic Link. So anyway,
Wow, that
on
sounds cool.
to my number four is the soundtrack from a game that's probably the contributing factor as to why I love games as much as I do in the first place. It would be from the soundtrack from Paper Mario Thousand Year Door.
Nice one.
Is
Yes.
I played that game regularly for a, just a bit over a decade, and like I don't know, it's in addition to like the boss thieves, just since each like region has its own unique track, it gives it a real sense of atmosphere. But my favorite is probably roughly through halfway in the game where you head into Twilight Town, a town full of people that vaguely resemble slightly haunted stuffed animals, and it really gives it. And though the Mario RPGs aren't known for being absolutely terrifying, like Luigi's Mansion, it does give a bit of a creepy atmosphere. And I'm not, and I do, since I'm not from a musical background, I'm not like familiar with the vocabularies used to describe it, but a lot of just eerie music's like it go. It's like this is gonna not gonna do it justice, but like
Sure.
that spooky wee when you're
Yeah.
like just giving it like some type of spooky atmosphere, or when you're actually like walking in the path in that particular area of the game. Like there's not a whole lot of actual music. It's more like there's some music, but it more just adds to the spooky ambience. And
Yeah.
the absolute highlight of that soundtrack for me is when you is the boss fight in chapter 4 featuring the bedsheet goat Dupless, which it really sounds like someone's getting like really funky on an electronic, like almost church like keyboard thing.
Wow.
uh Like I remember that, like because that's my favorite part of the game. That's like pretty much seared into my head forever. So
Wow.
yeah, is my number
That
four.
sounds really cool. And I wish I would have personally experienced that game. Well, I guess it's not too late. I wish I would have personally experienced that game for myself. I definitely have a lot of experience with the first Paper Mario and some of the more recent installments, the kind of the Color Splash spin-off, which that one didn't really click for me nearly as much. Um, but I've been hearing that Thousand Year Door is kind of like the best of the series, is regarded as the best of the series so far. And I have heard a couple of tracks. I don't think I've heard the one you're talking about, but I'm definitely going to go look it up now for sure. Because, I'm always looking for like spookier type of music. I mean, I'm into that kind of stuff for some strange reason. Hope I'm not a psychopath or anything. Yeah, that's a really good pick though, man. All right. So number four for me, and I'm sure I'm gonna have a lot of people that agree with me here. That is just a really great soundtrack. Is of course David Weiss, Donkey Kong Country 2. There's so many great tracks on there. And I should mention too, when I tried to come up with this list, I was like, because it's always hard to pick your favorite. So it's like I had to think about it a different way. I was like, well, you know what? What games can I think of right now whose music made a lot of impact on me and really added to the gameplay? Even if the gameplay was a little bit monotonous or not as great, did the music, does the music make me come back to it? And with all of these tracks, with all of these soundtracks I chose, the answer is yes. And so I just, literally locked myself in a room for 30 minutes and just thought about, like, I didn't go back and listen to anything else. I just thought about whatever I could remember, and the soundtracks that popped up, the ones I could just remember off the top of my head, these are the ones that I think are the most impactful. So the Smash Brothers Melee was very impactful, and Donkey Kong Country 2 very impactful. Very hard game too. I tried to go back and play it like a couple months ago. I sucked at it. That's a pretty tough game. But
It is.
some of my favorites from that track specifically, swashbuckling type of pirate theme to it, and uses those kind of like wind instruments. It's really cool sounds. Mining Melancholy, which that one has a lot of percussive elements that I'm a big fan of, like the sound of using an anvil or a break drum almost sound, which is really like a really heavy metallic sounding thing. That was very impactful. And then it has like one of my favorite final boss themes. When they fight K. Rool, it's one of my favorite final boss themes. It's really really like funky, groovy, and super cool. So David Weiss, really really puts his foot in everything he does. So Donkey Kong Country 2, that would be my number four pick.
Okay, let's see. So, my number three is a bit tough. Let's see. Since this is my show, I'm gonna cheat a bit and have it be a tie between the soundtrack between Super Paper Mario, the bits and pieces of the first Paper Mario, and the opening song from Paper Mario Color Splash. So it's just I've played those games for many an hours. In the first Paper Mario, my favorites would be the battle theme, since it sounds like someone's very energetically playing a wooden xylophone
Yeah.
while you're in a battle,
Yeah.
and which just like very upbeat, which I always appreciated. And my favorite boss theme is the Crystal King from the second to last chapter in Paper Mario.
Yes, I remember. That's a good
It's,
one.
I don't know. Like I'm not sure like what was used to make that song, but since like this whole play it takes place in a very cold region, and it's like it takes place in this huge elaborate ice castle, and when you finally get to the boss of the game, you're pretty far removed from the towns in that snowy area, and it really
Hmm.
it gives it a sense like you're about to have this intense battle, but like also in a very isolated context. And let's see, Super Paper
It does.
Mario would be like that was again one of the games of my younger days, and my favorites from that would probably be like from the in between chapters segment with memories, which is just in contrast to like the generally upbeat musics that Mario games are known for. So it's the Super Paper Mario is has quite a bit of a more tragic element to it. It's just I'm not sure what the like string instrument is. I want to say it's either a sitar or something close to it. When pretty much the only instrument is like those like long strings, and since there's in between segments, it's just a black background with white text where it's a flashback to the main villain, and then it's there you realize that Count Bleck's a lot more of a depressing and tragic figure than Nintendo is known for, and to flip that around in Paper Mario Color Splash, which I very much enjoyed, the opening theme for when you first boot up the game and right before you press start to begin, like that opening theme, that's just, I could listen to that for many hours, and oh goodness. Let's see if I can look it up and if it's the same as how I remember it.
Well, yeah, I'll have to boot my copy up and go back and take a second listen to it. Yeah, that's interesting about Super Paper Mario. I once again, that's one I did not have a personal experience with, and now that I think about it, I don't remember hearing uh I don't remember hearing about it a whole lot. But it sounds really good, and I really like the spin you're saying Nintendo put on it with the kind of being a little more tragic, maybe a little more melancholy.
Yeah,
I
that's
would
how
really
I'd
like to
describe it.
hear. Yeah, I'd really like to go and maybe look up some gameplay of that. That sounds like something I'd be into as well.
And Color Splash, since I just listened to the first bits of it and I just remembered some like why I love it, since the two primary instruments are just a straight up regular guitar, and when you listen to it with headphones on you can practically hear the person just like plucking the individual strings with their fingers, and it's also like a very upbeat fiddle, and since it's like a really just upbeat game, since it's a game about literally restoring color to the game's main setting. So
Mm-hmm.
so those three are my number three.
uh, lucky number three. Hey, that works for me, man. Hey, it's your show. Yeah, that works. That works for me. That's pretty cool. All right. So I guess switching over to my number three, I've got another kind of I guess I would say fanboy type. This one is gonna be Sonic 2, the 2D version, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And once again, one a game I had a huge personal experience with. And this is actually kind of fun because I didn't actually own the Genesis. The Genesis belonged to my auntie. And so every once in a while, I would, me and my sister would ask to go spend the night, to spend the weekend with our auntie. And she was, I really liked it because she had the Genesis, and my sister really liked going over there because she also had a little dog, a little dachshund, I believe they're called, the little wiener dogs. And
Mm-hmm.
her name was Lady. She was really cute, precious. Used to wake us up with love in the morning. So that was pretty cool. And then, but I would play Sonic so much, and I always keep coming back to Emerald Hill Zone. It's such a great opening theme. It's like the kind of theme because there's no save system on Sonic 2. So you die and you start there again, but it's okay because the music is awesome. And then you feed right into Chemical Plant Zone. Again, a level you get too often, but it's great because the music is great. And then right after that, you have Casino Night Zone, a little nice little jazzy number, and the music is awesome. I don't remember what comes level 4 because I feel like after Casino Night Zone, I would either have to go somewhere or I would lose and have to start all over again. But And then when you watch speed runs of it and you hear some more of the great music, the ending theme is very nice. That is the little outro, little cutscene at the end, and then the credits theme. The credits theme is really cool because it kind of makes it takes basically every other level theme in the game and puts a slight little remix, but puts them together in a medley, and then separates them by transitions that are awesome drum fills. And that's actually something I intend on covering in a later episode. I'm going to start up a volume specifically directed for fill ideas for playing on drums, and I'm going to be using some of those transition fills, and it's really cool. So I'm trying to think of what my favorite would be out of Sonic 2. I think my favorite would have to be Casino Night Zone, just because like it was kind of the first time I was exposed to like swing, well, besides Donkey Kong Country 1, but like, the swing with the walking bass in a video game. And even now it's really fun, especially to play on drums, on piano, on bass. It's a really fun song and very catchy, very melodic. And I just have such fond memories of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I love Sonic. Sonic's one of my favorites. I was trying super hard not to make everything on this list a Sonic game, so number three is what I settled on.
So, yep, so I'll move on to my number two, which my number two is an the soundtrack from Kirby's Epic Yarn, game that I absolutely adore. And
Wow, and
uh,
nice one.
yep, and just this whole like the music really does just complement the game absolutely perfectly, since it's like really like a lot of it's piano, and the piano is really soft, which fits in with the yarn aesthetic of the game, and it just really just hammers home that this is going to be a very pleasant ride from start to finish. But my absolute favorite track from there, let's see if I can remember the names. Kirby, uh, yep, it's from the well, bit of context. And one of the levels in Kirby's Epic Yarn, in a beach setting, it takes place at night, and it's just very soft. It's just the quiet music a lot of people would associate with like nighttime near a beach. And one of
Mm.
like the major shtick of the game is that once you find the sleeping sun and wake him up, it switches to a daytime theme, and like very obviously night and day difference. And my goodness, like I could probably, if this was this would be again music you could have at like a family party. So it's very like, I don't really know how to describe, but like something you'd expect at like a tropical beach party, like whereas in most in Lee and Epic Yarn, the piano is very soft. It's really energetic. Like you almost feel like you're going to get in a mambo or conga line, and just as while the song itself like isn't very long and loops after a bit, it slowly just, as it gets to like the minute mark, it adds a few more instruments, like in which to complement the piano. It adds like very like maraca sounds, which just add to the very tropical vibe it gives. And like and like the entire soundtrack is a delight. But that is like the out of like, if I could have any of those songs on my phone right now. The daytime theme for Splash Beach and Kirby's Epic Yarn, like that would I'd probably start dancing even if I was just, walking down the street or something like that.
Wow, yeah. Man, yeah. I had wanted to get that. My backlog like of games that I want to go back and play, even though at this point they're like extremely old, is just ridiculous. I really wanted to play that and get into it, because I heard such great things about the gameplay and the soundtrack. I believe Tomoya Tamoya something was the composer for that one, and it was cool. And it's interesting because uh, I'm used to Hirokazu Ando in on most of the Kirby soundtracks, and I believe Tomoya he took care of this one essentially on his own, and so I'm very curious to hear the direction it goes in. We have Hirokazu Ando that pretty much him and one other person that pretty much took on a lot of the early Kirby games, basically from the Nintendo, from the Super Nintendo to the 64, the Kirby 64 that I just did a recent episode on. Um, and Jun Ishikawa, that's who it was. And Jun Ishikawa, those two guys are like the main Kirby people, and they've been in on pretty much every Kirby game except for that one. So I'm very curious to go back and listen to that soundtrack now and see what kind of direction it's in. Sounds very different from what Kirby is like typically known for. Like, would you say that the soundtrack is like still pretty campy and like very bright and sparkly, or does it kind of have a variety of stuff?
Um, well, geez, I don't really know how to describe it. I mean, the Kirby set, like, because like all the songs in Epic Yarn are very different of each other, very different from each other, just to
Mm.
match the visual style of each level. Because
Oh
one's like the
wow.
regular, like springtime forest level, one's a scary volcano, others like under the sea adventures, and like the final levels, which take place in a yarnified like DDD's castle, or again like just the classic Kirby tunes you've heard before, but because like the piano is the instrument that takes point, it feels like an entirely new song.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like a brand new direction. Yeah, I can't wait to go and listen to that. That sounds very exciting. Very nice. Excellent pick, my friend. Excellent pick.
Thank you.
So, before I move on to mine, I'm actually noticing a bit of a pattern. Uh, I can see that you are a giant Nintendo fan because basically
Absolutely.
everything, basically everything's been first party Nintendo. So I can say I definitely appreciate that. That's really cool. Oh, my camera's off. That's really cool. First party Nintendo, and I'm noticing. I thought I would kind of lean more towards Nintendo, but now I'm looking at my list and hearing yours. I'm seeing that I'm I like the variety of stuff. I haven't really, other than Donkey Kong, I haven't really named anything really flagship by Nintendo, and on my list doesn't have anything flagship by Nintendo actually. So that's pretty. That's I just like how we're getting this huge difference. Like a lot of different soundtracks and exposing your listeners to these really cool things. So that's
Hmm.
really nice. Okay. Now, on to my number two. This one may be considered a bit of a black sheep here. So, this is an actual Final Fantasy game, but it's a spin off that kind of gets dismissed. So, the game is called Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. It came out for the Super Nintendo, I forget, pretty late in its career, if pretty late in its lifetime, if I remember correctly. And if I recall, it wasn't even really supposed to be an actual Final Fantasy game. I think it was started development as just something totally different, but slapped Final Fantasy on here. But in Japan, it was released as Final Fantasy Legends. But anyway, it's kind of like JRPGs for dummies, essentially. That's actually I did a episode on this in November on one of my favorite tracks, which I'll get to in a second. And it's basically like it has all the elements of that Final Fantasy type, right? But you only have one extra party member plus yours. You don't purchase your armor or weapons or anything. You find them and then you just upgrade, and it automatically upgrades as it goes along. So it takes out a lot of like the specific, or rather the player oriented details, and it just shows you to them and shows you this is what's happening right now, so the player can just focus on the gameplay. And it gets criticized for being like boring or too easy, but I always look at it like, well, you got to think about it for what it is. Like, it's obviously not meant for like hardcore people who already know everything there is to know about RPGs. This is obviously for, and especially since it was released in America the year after it came out as Final Fantasy Legends, this is obviously for people who have no idea what JRPGs even are, what they're supposed to do. And this was my first JRPG, and I thought it did a great job. And this is what got me into Final Fantasy games. Anyway, rant over. The soundtrack is really awesome, really rocking soundtrack. Some things I can name, like the battle themes. All of the battle themes are really good. The normal battle, boss battle, and then the final boss battle is like creepy and ethereal, but also has some really rocking elements to it as well. But my absolute favorite track on here is called Spencer's Place. It's a cool little chill type of vibing piece where the drum part, and I go into this in one of my episodes, it does what we call a linear drum pattern, which essentially means it's playing one surface at a time in each beat. So you'll go like hi-hat, snare drum, kick drum, all in order, but nothing ever sounds at the same time. And so I did an episode on that to introduce drummers to linear patterns. But like the vibe of the piece is like so cool and so chill. And I'm trying to think, the first time you hear this is whenever you go to, and it's in like an ice cave. And it's so funny how, look, those cold themes, they always kind of have like similar sounds, really high pitched instruments, and a lot of times they'll be either really vibey or super duper upbeat. And and it just works so well. I could listen to it over and over and over. The loop itself isn't very long, but I could just listen to it forever. So I think if I had to pick one track, Spencer's Place would be the track I take from Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. And also, it's a really great game. I think people should give it another chance.
Okay. So now on to my number one, and the more I think on it, the more I realize this is not really a contest for me. It would be a soundtrack between of one of that game company's big hits back in the PS3 and has since been ported to the PS4. Their soundtrack to the game Journey. Now, that is the very first time I played Journey, I was just absolutely captivated, just because brief, extremely brief summary, so as not to spoil anything. But you hear this red cloaked, limbless, no idea what it is, but this this armless figure, like just sitting in the sand, and like the game has like no text or spoken dialogue at all, which you really can, as you progress through the story, it has, you have to pretty much piece it together yourself. And the only thing you know to do really is head to the very large mountain in the distance. And since it's a journey, the soundtrack really has like the ups and downs one would expect of like a typical hero's journey. Like in the beginning areas, it's more whimsical as you're just uncovering more of the world, and discovering and interacting with these creatures who are all like made out of some manner of enchanted cloth, but it can also, like in the second chunk of the game, it can also get scary when you're in a part where you're like deep underground in one of the ruined buildings. There's almost no natural light, and like the area is being patrolled by these like really like flying statue monsters that if they get a bead on you, it makes really not high pitched, but really just eerie sound as they just crash right into you. And the whole thing, and the cave section, the whole thing is a lot more subdued to help convey the sense that you're like in a very dark cave, very far away from safety. And I don't want to give like too much away about the soundtrack since it's like so, in my opinion, so integral to the experience of the game. But like the beginning where you don't really know and you don't and you're just figuring things out, it's a lot simpler. But as you uncover more and more as to what happened to the place you're journeying through, it gets like a lot more complicated. It can when you're in a lot more when you're in more desolate parts of the game where there's just ruins and none of the adorable cloth creatures, it gets a lot more subdued. And like this game is probably would be my go-to example of like using music to both complement and enhance the atmosphere of a game.
Wow. That sounds like a really awesome game. I've never even heard of it. It sounds like a really cool game, though.
Should be it's I know for a fact it's on the PS3, and I think it's been remastered for the PS4 because this is when they had a contract with Sony.
Wow,
So
Journey.
that is
Yeah.
my number one.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go and watch somebody's Let's Play of that. That sounds like a really, really cool game. I love when when developers and designers like come together to like make the music a part of like what's happening on screen, like literally. Like I love when they do that because then not only do these moments they make them more impactful, but it makes the music more impactful too. And so from now on, you can't disassociate one from the other. You see that scene, you remember the music, you remember the music, you think about that scene. Yeah, I love stuff like that. I've got to go check that game out for sure. Yeah, you've given an entire list of games that I've never personally experienced, and not that that's surprising because honestly, comparatively, I don't think I have too much experience with like just I guess the log of games I've played over my lifetime is just probably smaller than the average gamer. But I hear about and I talk to a lot of gamer friends and watch a lot of Let's Plays. So that's kind of where a lot of my experiences come from. But bravo, I love your list. I have so much more music to explore now. So thank you for sharing all that with me.
Thank you. So now we move on to your number one.
All right. Well, my number one is a soundtrack that just gets me in the feels because the game got me in the feels, and this would be the Animal Crossing from the original GameCube. So the first Animal Crossing on GameCube, and I specifically named that one because even though the more recent installments have a lot of the same tracks that I'm going to name as my favorites. I just got to give it to the original because when Nintendo put this out, they really didn't even think it was gonna be much of anything. It was just kind of an idea. They were just putting it out there, trying it out, and it ended up being a hit. And a lot of me and my friends, we really got into it, especially with the introduction of KK Slider. Like you really can't beat that. Like, and then all the different kinds of styles, that he wrote in, or the composers wrote in for KK, and of course the funny little voice he sings in. Um, it just, and just the whole experience of the game. It's really, I don't know, just really impactful, really relaxing. Something relaxing, I guess, about just being able to enjoy a game that's not about, defeating a boss or rescuing a princess or going super fast. Just a game about living life that, it's just fun enough, just, kooky enough to not be mundane, but also chill enough to where, you can just pick it up and play for hours and always find something to do. Um, so my among my favorites are just some of the KK Slider tracks. KK Cruisin' is my absolute favorite. I still not even quite sure what genre of music. So if you're not familiar with KK Slider and Animal Crossing, basically KK Slider is a dog that, well, Animal Crossing is a game where a human is placed in a city full of animal folk, and everybody's just trying to live their best lives. Essentially, you collect bells, you try to pay off your house that a raccoon gave you for free, but not really, because now you got to pay him back. And when you finally do pay him off, he upgrades your house whether you want him to or not, and then you got to pay him back for that.
Tom Nook.
Yeah, Tom Nook, almost like a game about debt. Tom Nook, my friend. um, but so if you're not, for your listeners, if you're not familiar with KK Slider, he's a dog that plays guitars on Saturday nights. Now he's a DJ, as far as I remember from the last installment. But he used to play acoustic guitar on Saturday nights, and you can go up to him and talk, and he would sing you a cool little song. All of his songs were named for after different musical styles, such as KK Jazz, KK Bossa Nova, KK Rock and Roll, a whole bunch, KK Country, whole bunch of stuff. My favorite is KK Cruisin'. I never quite remembered or figured out what genre exactly I would call it. But it's like a really another chill vibe piece. And I notice like I get to those a lot, like the chill pieces, like especially if we go back to my number four, DKC2, David Weiss. He does a lot of chill pieces, and KK Cruisin's really chill. For that, a close second would be KK Jazz. That's a really cool one. KK Bossa, actually, the ones I named are my top three. And just the impact that it had on me, and the fact that I can. Oh, and don't get me started on the remixes. The people that remix those, I'm sure you've heard. They just reimagine them in like the most creative ways possible, and it's so cool that these simple melodies and progressions can just be rethought of and reused in so many creative and awesome and inspiring ways. So Animal Crossing would probably definitely takes my number one spot for favorite soundtrack of all time.
Okay, then. And with that, it brings this particular episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast to a close. I would like to thank Kenny for joining me and just shooting the breeze about video game musics.
Absolutely, T. Gorman. It's always a pleasure. And thank you so much for having me on yet again.
Thank you. And if any of the -7 people listening to this enjoyed listening to this, feel free to like and subscribe. Be sure to follow Kenny's channel and all of the stuff he's putting out at k.washington. Yep. Yep. You can follow the both of us on our Twitters. And just shameless plug, but if you want to go to patreon.com/thepumpkincoptercast and give me even $1, you're more than welcome to. You don't have to, but again, if you want to, the option's there. And so, yep, this has been the Pumpkin Copter Cast, the only video game show, and I hope all of you have a gourd day.